I used to think my wife Emily and my best friend Daniel were the light in my life. It wasn't until that Christmas night that I realized they had been weaving a huge conspiracy behind my back. The PlayStation gifts I prepared for the kids became the fuse that ignited the truth. When I overheard Emily telling the children that their real father was Daniel, my world collapsed. And that was just the beginning of the revenge. Pausing outside their bedroom door, I heard Emily's voice, sweet and syrupy. The kind of tone she used when she was weaving a story. My breath hitched in instinctively. I leaned closer to the door. Your real father is Daniel, Emily said, her voice dropping as if delivering a secret. She has been wanting to tell you for years. I froze. My grip on the consoles tightened until I felt the cardboard give. The words barely registered at first. Daniel, my best friend. Daniel. The tilt of the world beneath me was sudden, but my mind stayed razor sharp. I needed to hear everything. That doesn't make sense, Ethan said. I could hear the crack in his voice. Dad's always been there every game, every science fair. He even coached our team when Coach Stevens was sick. That's because Daniel Calvin, Emily said with a laugh. That made my blood run cold. He is the chief surgeon. Sading laughs. You don't know how hard it's been for him, watching another man raise his children. Then, why didn't he say anything before? Max asked, skeptical. As always, because we had to wait. Emily K's voice dropped again. Conspiratorial. The house is almost paid off after Christmas dinner. Well, tell everyone the truth. You'll get everything in the divorce and we'll finally be a real family with Daniel. I saw Ed. My world tilted. But I forced myself to stay silent. The boys didn't deserve this chaos, and I needed to process everything. Does Dad know? Max whispered. Of course not, Emily replied, her voice dripping with contempt. Yes, so trusting. So naive. That's why Daniel chose him. Those words cut deeper than anything else. It all made sense. Now, Daniel's friendly nudges over the years is steering me towards certain contracts. The promotions that seemed too good to be true every moment. Every success had been carefully orchestrated. Not for me, but against me. I backed away from the door, quietly. Years of coaching baseball, giving me the practiced stealth of a seasoned base runner. The PlayStation boxes ended up in the study along with other gifts I planned to wrap later. Not tonight. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in my country's side. They would serve a different purpose. Now at my desk, I opened the drawer where the house documents were kept. Emily words about taking. Everything echoed in my mind. But she had underestimated me. Mistaking my kindness for weakness would be her first mistake. I pulled out my phone and sent a short message to Detective Sophia Martinez. Need to meet it's about Daniel Williams. Sophia had been trying to build a case against hospital corruption for years now. I had a feeling I knew why she'd been hitting dead ends. I glanced at my phone screen one last time. My background photo was a picture of me and the boys fishing. Their identical grins, matching my own. They weren't just my sons by law or by obligation. They were my sons, because it poured everything into them. The world might say otherwise, but I was going to make sure that when the truth came out, it was on my terms. The diner hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked leather booth, same flickering neon sign buzzing just outside the window. Same coffee that tasted burnt no matter how much cream and sugar you added. It was the kind of place that people came to when they wanted to avoid being seen. Perfect for a meeting like this. I slid into the booth, scanning the room as I waited. Sophia was already here, her back to the wall, sipping from a chipped mug. She didn't look up as I approached. That was her way. Always aware, always a step ahead. Even without her badge in sight, she exuded authority. She gestured toward the opposite seat as I approached. You look like Helltone, she said, leaning in once I sat down. Wait until you hear why, I replied, sliding a manila envelope across the table. She opened it, flipping through the documents inside. with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd spent decades reading criminal case files. Her expression didn't change, but I caught the subtle tightening around her eyes when she hit the financial reports. These pricing structures are insane. She muttered, inflated by at least 40 over JCAT rates. 50 on some items, I said. I always thought it was just health care. Jacob, I'm starting to think otherwise. Sophia sat back, tapping her nails on the edge of the table. Tell me everything. I laid it all out methodically and without emotion. The chance meeting with Emily 15 years ago. Danielle's convenient job offer just before the boys were born. The steady stream of contracts with his hospital that had earned me one promotion after another. Sophia listened without interrupting, though. Her lips thinned as the picture came together. When I finished, she pulled out her own folder. It was thicker than mine, and as she laid it open on the table, the burnt coffee in my cup grew colder. Here's where it gets worse, she said. Those medical devices your company's been selling. They're counterfeits, high-quality knockoffs from overseas, and your name is all over the import documentation. I leaned back in the booth, letting the weight of her words sink in. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. Danielle hadn't just used me. HED built an entire criminal enterprise around me. Every success, I thought, it earned every proud moment in my career, had been orchestrated to make me the perfect fall guy. Yuri. The PSY, Sophia said, her voice tight with frustration. The squeaky, clean family man. Little league coach. Beloved member of the community. No one would ever suspect you were knowingly involved in something like this. And if anyone started digging, the truth about the boys would come out. I added quietly. My reputation would be ruined no matter what. She nodded. They've got you boxed in on all sides. So what are you going to do? I stare out the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. In uneven rails, my reflection stared back at me. Calm despite the storm inside. Emily is planning to make her big reveal at Christmas dinner. She thinks it's a trump card. Destroy me personally and professionally in one move. We have enough to arrest them. Now, Sophia said, we could stop it before it gets that far. No, my voice was steady, firm. They've spent 13 years setting this up. I owe them the same courtesy. Sophia studied me for a moment, then nodded. What do you need? I pulled out my phone, opening an email from a real estate lawyer he'd been in contact with. How much do you know about irrevocable trust? The DNA testing lab was cold and sterile, but that suited me just fine. The technician barely glanced at me as she processed the hair samples it collected from the boys' combs. I didn't need confirmation. I already knew the truth, but something in me needed to see it in black and white to hold the proof in my hands. Results will be ready in 48 hours, the technician said, her voice neutral and professional. I nodded and left, without another word. My focus shifted as soon as I stepped outside, pulling my phone from my pocket. Emily's email password hadn't been hard to crack. Our anniversary date, because she always found irony amusing. What I found inside turned my stomach. The emails between her and Daniel went back 13 years to just before the twins were born. Their plan had been meticulous, calculated from the start. Daniel had orchestrated our meeting, knowing exactly what kind of person Emily was: ambitious, materialistic, willing to play the long game, willing to do whatever it took to secure her place in the life she wanted. UNS perfect, Emily had written in one email. So earnest, so desperate to be a good husband and father. Hell, never suspect a thing. Danielle's response was just as calculating. Once the import operation is established, well, need his signature on everything. If anyone starts investigating, all roads will lead to him. The timestamps on the emails told their own story. Years of manipulation, building me up while laying the groundwork for my downfall. Every family dinner, every friendly golf game, every piece of advice from Daniel. They'd all been part of the plan, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd given me something worth fighting for. Olivia Williams sat across from me in a quiet corner of the downtown legal library. She was polished as ever, her designer handbag placed neatly on the table, next to a manila envelope, but her eyes held a sharpness I hadn't seen before. I've been waiting for someone to figure it out, she said without preamble. 3 years I've been gathering evidence, bank transfers, shipping manifests, email exchanges. She slid a USB drive across the table. Daniel thinks I'm an idiot who only cares about charity, galas and tennis matches. Emily thinks I'm her closest confidant. Neither of them realized I've been documenting everything. I studied her carefully. Why help me? Olivia's composure didn't falter, but her manicured nails dug into her. We're pawn. Because 13 years ago, my husband and your wife didn't just betray us. They betrayed those boys. Made them pawns in their game. Her voice dropped steady and cold. A cowden of children of my own. You see, but I've watched you raise those boys. You're 10 times the father am I take it ever be. She stood smoothing her silk blouse. Emily, think she's taking everything from you at Christmas. Make sure she loses it all. Instead, I waited until she was gone before opening the USB drive on my laptop. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell companies in Delaware, records of counterfeit medical devices, and London money. And more than that, proof that Daniel had known about the boys' paternity long before they were born. HED planned everything down to the smallest detail. And now I had everything I needed to take it apart by the time the DNA results came in. I didn't feel anything when I read them. I stared at the confirmation that Daniel was the biological father, but the words didn't sting. They only solidified what I'd already decided. Biology didn't make a father. Love did. I tucked the results into a folder with the rest of the evidence it gathered and pulled out my phone. Emily thought she was clever, but her carelessness with passwords had given me a front row seat to her and Daniel's entire operation. They'd spent 13 years building a perfect trap. It was time to spring it. The law office of Claire Chin occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown high-rise. Its mahogany furniture and brass fixtures exuded old money, elegance. This was a place for people who played the long game where ironclad legal strategies were crafted and executed with precision. Claire herself was every bit as meticulous as her office. She sat across from me, her sharp eyes scanning the documents spread across her desk. Next to her, Sophia stood by the window, her badge prominently displayed on her belt. It was a deliberate statement. This was just a legal meeting. It carried the weight of the law. The structure of this trust is complex. Claire began spreading out the diagrams of financial frameworks. Once executed. You cannot modify or revoke it. The house, the investments and the secondary properties will transfer to the trust, with specific conditions governing your son's access. Walk me through the security measures, I said, leaning forward. My voice was steady, the same tone I used when managing million-dollar contracts. Claire nodded, pulling another document from the stack. The trust has 3 layers of protection. First, Sophia will serve as primary trustee until the twins turn 21. Second, all major financial decisions will require dual authorization from both boys once they come of age. Third, I've included a spendthrift clause that prevents creditors or future spouses from accessing the trust's assets and the conditions for access: maintenance of a 30 GPA, no criminal record, and completion of financial literacy courses. I've arranged for the courses to be provided by Maxwell Investment Group. The framework was airtight. The boys wouldn't just inherit wealth. They'd have to earn it. They'd have to prove themselves worthy of the legacy. I was creating one step at a time. Sophia turned from the window. I've documented every contract between your company and Central Hospital. For the past decade, the pattern is clear. Standard supplies get up by for specialized equipment by as much as 60. Daniel got greedy, I said, flipping through the pages. The Jacob rates had increased steadily over the years, a slow boil that had gone unnoticed until now. That's not all, Sophia added, pulling out her own folder. The FDA is asking questions about equipment certifications. There were several surgical complications last month linked to counterfeit devices. I set down my pen. The counterfeit are failing, which makes our timing critical. Claire interjected. The house payment clears next week. We need everything transferred before the dominoes start falling. We were interrupted by a soft knock. Claire's secretary entered, her expression tight. Olivia Williams is waiting in the lobby. When Olivia joined us, she carried the same air of poise she had had at the library. But there was a new intensity in her gaze. She placed a USB drive on the table. Danielle's been using my charitable foundation to launder money, she said. Her voice shook. The foundation's work with third world hospitals provided the perfect cover for importing counterfeit devices. She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table. Emily has been moving the profits offshore through a network of shell companies. Sophia picked up the drive, her practiced movements betraying her excitement. This is more than we hoped for. Olivia was finished. I also have recordings. Emily loves to talk during our spa days. She never noticed the pin I always wear. It has a built-in recorder. She reached into her bag again, pulling out another folder. This is the last piece. Proof that Daniel knew about the twins' paternity before he orchestrated your meeting with Emily. My expression didn't change, but my hands tightened on the edge of the table. Explain. Olivia's voice was cold. Daniel chose her deliberately. He knew she was ambitious enough to play the long game, materialistic enough to be controlled by money. And most importantly, already pregnant with his children. They needed someone with an impeccable reputation. A family man who would be above suspicion. You were the perfect Jake. I forced my breathing to remain even. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was premeditated destruction. Sophia's voice cut through my thoughts. Why help us? Olivia's perfect posture finally slipped. And for a moment, I saw the pain beneath the surface because I couldn't have children. Daniel made sure of that years ago during what should have been routine surgery. He said, it was unavoidable last month. I found the records proving. Otherwise, she smoothed her blouse, regaining her composure. Emily thinks she's taking everything from you at Christmas. Make sure she loses it all. Instead, after Olivia left, Sophia plugged the USB drive into her laptop. The evidence was damning: financial records, recorded conversations, video footage from charity events. It was a complete map of Daniel and Emily's operation laid bare for us to dismantle. It's time to accelerate the plan, Sophia said, her eyes gleaming with determination. I nodded, my resolve hardening. Let's make sure they get exactly what they deserve. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation by day. I worked with Sophia and Claire to finalize the trust documents and organize the evidence against Daniel and Emily. By night, I spent every moment I could with Ethan and Max. The lessons started. Simple. Fixing leaky faucets, changing oil, replacing light fixtures. But as the days passed, I introduced them to more complex skills. Budgeting, understanding, credit scores, spotting scams. The boys soaked it all up, their natural curiosity and intelligence shining through. Life has a way of revealing the truth at unexpected moments. I told them one evening, as we replaced a section of drywall, what matters isn't the size of your house or the money in your account. It's your character. How you handle victory and defeat. Ethan and Max exchanged a look. The kind of silent communication that only twins could share. Finally, Ethan spoke. Dad. We overheard Mom on the phone with Uncle Daniel. My hand stilled. What did you hear? She said. Something about Christmas dinner. Max said, his voice tight. She was laughing about how you wouldn't see it coming. She said, we'd be moving into Uncle Daniel's house. Ethan nodded in anger simmering beneath his words. That we wouldn't need to know any of these working class skills anymore. I looked at my sons, my boys, and felt a surge of pride. They weren't just listening to me. They were thinking, critically questioning what they'd heard, processing the truth for themselves. Remember this, I said, quietly. Life isn't about what you're given, it's about what you choose to do with it. People will show you who they are through their actions. Pay attention. Learn from them. Their faces were solemn as they nodded, and I knew the lessons were sinking in that night as Emily laughed on the phone with Daniel in the other room. I recorded the first of many videos for the boys' messages. For their birthdays, graduations, weddings, every stone. Unlike this, each video carried the same message: strength isn't about avoiding hard choices. It's about facing them with integrity. Emily noticed the extra time I was spending with the boys, but she misinterpreted entirely getting in some last-minute bonding. She asked, one evening, how sweet. I met her gaze, evenly, just preparing them for the future. Her laugh was cold. Oh, don't worry, Daniel. And I have their future all planned out. She had no idea. The plan was in motion. All that was left was the execution. The week leading up to Christmas felt like the eye of a storm. The house hummed with the usual holiday activity. Emily, pretending to care about decorations. The twins, planning their gifts for each other. The faint scent of pine mixing with the crisp chill of winter air on the surface. Everything seemed normal. But beneath that facade, I was orchestrating my own kind of holiday surprise. Late at night, when Emily thought I was asleep, I combed through her email account, collecting years of correspondence between her and Daniel. Each message painted a clearer picture of their operation, their betrayals and their arrogance. It was all there in black and white. The fraudulent contracts, the money laundering, and their detailed plans for my eventual downfall. By the time it backed up, the final files onto an encrypted drive, I felt nothing but cold determination. Emily and Daniel thought they were untouchable. They believed I was too trusting, too naive, too weak. They had no idea what was coming on Christmas Eve. I made my final preparations. The house was quiet, the boys asleep. Emily locked in the guest room where she'd been pretending to stay up late, wrapping gifts. I took the 3 envelopes Sid prepared and placed them on my desk. Each one represented a different truth together. They were a weapon powerful enough to shatter everything Emily and Daniel had built. The first envelope contained the DNA test results, but it wasn't just a simple paternity test. I had included photos of the moments that truly defined fatherhood. Baseball, games, bicycles, science fairs, camping trips, pictures of me, teaching Ethan to pitch, helping Max with his science project, and guiding them through life's challenges. These were the memories that mattered, not genetics. The second envelope was heavier, filled with evidence of betrayal. Olivia's USB drive had been backed up and expanded, now containing financial records, shipping manifests, and even video footage. It laid out the entire web of fraud and deceit, a map of Daniel and Emily's criminal empire. It was a ticking time bomb. The third envelope held the trust paperwork, along with letters from Claire's banking contacts. These documents revealed the freezing of Daniel and Emily's personal accounts, the dissolution of their assets, and the protections now in place for the boys. Emily thought she'd be taking everything from me. She'd soon learn that I had beaten her to it. On top of the envelopes, I placed a single sheet of paper, N.W. written in bold, steady strokes. The truth is both a gift and a burden. Choose wisely. I stared at the desk for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle upstairs. I could hear Emily's faint laughter as she chatted with Daniel on the phone. She was rehearsing her victory speech, savoring the moment. She thought would destroy me. Let her enjoy it. I thought it would make her fall that much harder. Christmas morning arrived with all the usual excitement. The boys rushed downstairs to open their gifts, their faces lighting up as they tore through wrapping paper. Emily played her part, perfectly smiling and laughing, as if nothing was amiss. But I noticed the way her eyes darted toward the desk, the slight tension in her movements. She found the envelopes at 607 and I heard the muffled sound of her gasp, followed by the rapid shuffle of papers. I stayed in the living room with the boys, feigning ignorance, as she scrambled to make sense of what she had found. Her footsteps pounded down the stairs, and she burst into the room, clutching the papers in her shaking hands. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice shrill. I sat down, my coffee, calmly, meeting her gaze. "It's the truth." Her face twisted with rage. "You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You thought you could manipulate me, destroy me, and walk away unscathed. You were wrong. She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could, Ethan spoke. What's going on? He asked, his eyes narrowing as he looked between us. Emily turned toward him, her expression softening as she tried to regain control. It's nothing, sweetheart. Just some legal paperwork. Your father and I need to discuss. It's not nothing, Max said, his voice sharp. He was already scanning the paper. Emily had dropped in her haste. What is this DNA test? Why does it say Daniel Williams is our biological father? Ethan picked up the papers, his expression darkening as he read. And what's this about counterfeit medical devices? Fraud. Money laundering. Emily's mask slipped, panic flashing across her face. It's all lies, she stammered. Your father is trying to turn you against me. Stop, I said, my voice cutting through her excuses. The evidence speaks for itself. I didn't have to twist anything. The twins looked at me, their faces pale, but resolute. Is this all true? Ethan asked. I met their eyes steadily, yes. But what matters isn't who shares your DNA. What matters is who's been there for you, who's taught you right from wrong, who's fought for you. When it counted, that's what makes a father. The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling over all of us. Emily stood frozen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. Finally, Max broke the silence. Mom, is this why you've been spending so much time with Uncle Daniel? Because you were planning this. Emily tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her silence was all the confirmation they needed. Ethan straightened, his jaw tightened. Dad taught us to judge people by their choices, not their circumstances. You and Daniel chose this. You betrayed us. Max nodded, his expression hardening. And Dad chose to protect us even when it cost him everything. That's what real love looks like. Emily's knees buckled and she slumped into a chair, her face pale. She opened her mouth to protest, but the boys were already leaving the room. They didn't need to hear anymore. I turned back to Emily, my voice low and steady. You thought you could take everything from me. You thought you could destroy me. But you forgot one thing. Real strength isn't about power. It's about character. And you have none. Her sobs echoed in the empty room as I walked away upstairs. I found the boys sitting on Ethan's bed, their faces somber, but determined. I sat down beside them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. You're going to be okay, I said. This is a lot to process, but you'll get through it. And no matter what, he'll always be here for you. They nodded, their eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. The boys weren't just my sons. They were my legacy, and they were stronger than I ever could have imagined. The sun rose higher as Christmas Day unfolded, casting a golden glow over the house. From the outside, everything must have seemed perfect. A family, gathering the tree, decorated with precision, the scent of cinnamon wafting through the air. But inside the walls were cracking. The truth laid bare in those envelopes had set a chain reaction in motion, and there was no stopping it. Now by mid-morning, the boys were locked in their room, their voices low and serious as they talked through what they'd learned. Emily had retreated to the guest room, frantically making phone calls. I could hear the muffled sound of her voice, rising and falling. In desperation, she was calling Daniel, no doubt trying to salvage whatever scraps of her plan she could, but it was already too late around noon. Emily emerged from the guest room, her hair disheveled, and her face blotchy from crying. She cornered me in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she sealed, clutched a stack of the documents I'd left for her. You've ruined everything, she hissed. Do you know what you've done? I turned to face her, leaning against the counter with deliberate calm. What he done is give the boys the truth. Something you and Daniel were never going to do. Her face contorted with rage. You think you're so clever, don't you? Do you have any idea how much damage this will cost them to us? The damage was already done, the moment you decided to betray our family. I said coldly. This isn't about me. It's about your choices. You and Daniel did this to yourselves. Emily's lips parted as if to argue, but she stopped herself. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time, she looked truly defeated. You don't understand, she muttered. I did this for them for the future. I shook my head, my voice steady. No, Emily. You did this for yourself. You thought you could take everything, and you didn't care who got hurt along the way. Her eyes filled with tears. But I didn't feel an ounce of pity. I had spent years loving her, trusting her, building a life with her. That part of me was gone now, burned away by the truth. The boys came downstairs in the afternoon, their faces grim, but determined. They had been talking for hours, and I could tell they had reached some kind of decision. Dad, Ethan said, his voice steady, but tinged with emotion. We need to know what happens now. I gestured for them to sit down at the dining table. Emily hovered in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, but I ignored her. This conversation was for the boys' ears. What you need to understand. I began. The truth is out. Now that means there's going to be fallout. People will talk. There might be investigations. Things will get messy. But no matter what, you two are protected. Max frowned. Protected? How? I pulled out the trust documents and laid them on the table. This trust ensures that you'll always have a home, an education, and a secure future. It's locked tight. Nothing and no one can take it from you. But there are conditions. Ethan leaned forward, scanning the documents with a sharp eye. A 30 DPA. No criminal record and financial literacy courses. That's right. I said these conditions aren't about controlling you. They're about preparing you. Life is going to throw challenges your way, and I want you to have the tools to handle them. Max looked up, his expression softening. You planned all of this for us. I nodded. Because I love you. Because I believe in you. And because I wanted to make sure you'd always be able to stand on your own. Ethan exchanged a glance with Max, and I saw the unspoken agreement pass between them. Well, do it, he said, firmly. Well, in the facade. Honor your trust. For the first time in days, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The boys were strong, stronger than I had ever imagined that evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily made one last desperate attempt to regain control. She cornered the boys in the living room, her voice trembling as she tried to spin her version of events. Your father is manipulating you, she said, her tone thick with false emotion. He wants you to hate me, to turn against me. But you have to understand, I did what I did for your sake, for our family. Ethan stared at her, his jaw set. You lied to us for years. You used us. He stepped forward, his voice calm. That unwavering. Dad didn't manipulate us. He gave us the truth. You've been the one manipulating everyone. Emily's composure cracked. Your mother, she cried. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Ethan's response was quiet, but devastating. A real parent protects their children. Dad protected us, even when it cost him everything. You and Daniel didn't. Max nodded, his gaze steady. Dad taught us what matters. Honor, truth, and character. You and Daniel taught us what not to be. Emily's face crumpled and she sank into the couch, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The boys didn't stay to watch. They turned and walked upstairs together, their heads held high. The next morning, the fallout began in earnest. Sophia called to inform me that the FDA had launched a surprise investigation into Daniel's hospital network. Armed with the evidence we had provided, Olivia had called an emergency meeting with the hospital board, presenting her own damning documentation of the fraud. By noon, Daniel was in FBI custody. News outlets were already reporting the arrest, and the headlines painted a grim picture. Chief surgeon arrested in counterfeit medical device. Scandal. Emily's meltdown was immediate and dramatic. She spent the day making frantic phone calls, trying to salvage what little remained of her life. But it was no use. By the end of the day, her accounts had been frozen. Her reputation was in tatters, and the house was no longer hers to claim. The boys and I watched it all unfold from the kitchen. The television muted as the news anchors dissected the story. Ethan turned to me. His eyes thoughtful. You knew this would happen, didn't you? I nodded. I knew it was the only way to make sure the truth came out. Mac's voice was quiet, but resolute. You didn't just protect us. You taught us how to protect ourselves. I reached out, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. That's what a father does. As the evening wore on, the house grew quiet. Emily locked herself in the guest room. Her BBS barely audible through the door. The boys retreated to their room, their bonds stronger than ever. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the Christmas tree. The fallout had been devastating, but it was necessary. The truth had torn our family apart, but it had also set my sons free. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could have given them. The days following Christmas were a whirlwind. The story of Daniel's arrest spread quickly, and with it came a cascade of consequences. News outlets seized on every detail of the counterfeit medical device scandal, piecing together a narrative of greed, betrayal, and fraud. Emily's name began to surface as well, her involvement becoming increasingly clear by New Year's Eve. The world, as she knew, it was gone. Meanwhile, the boys and I began to rebuild. Olivia called me the morning after Christmas, her tone sharper than usual, but carrying a hint of satisfaction. You won't believe what just happened, she said. Daniel's hospital board voted unanimously to terminate his position. They're already scrubbing his name from every plaque in the building. I let out of breath. I hadn't realized I was holding. What about the FDA investigation? They've expanded it to 3 more hospitals in his network, she said. And guess who provided them with a treasure trove of documentation? Her voice turned why. I always said, you'd get my revenge. But this is beyond what I imagined. I couldn't help but smile. You've done more than anyone could have asked. Thank you. Olivia's tone softened. Don't thank me. Just make sure those boys know the truth about who their real father is. I intend to. Sophia's updates came daily, each one more satisfying than the last. Daniel's offshore accounts had been frozen, his assets seized, and his fraudulent network dismantled. Emily's accounts were similarly locked, leaving her with nothing but a growing pile of legal troubles. The FBI had formally charged both of them with conspiracy, fraud and money laundering. Their trials were already being scheduled. The boys handled the fallout with a maturity that astounded me. They threw themselves into their schoolwork, determined to meet the conditions of the trust. Ethan took the lead, setting up a schedule for their financial literacy courses and ensuring they both understood the basics of budgeting, investing, and credit management. Maxa, the scientist, approached the process with the same meticulous attention to detail he used for his experiments. One evening, as we sat around the dining table, reviewing their coursework, Ethan looked up from his notebook. Dad, why did you do all of this? The trust, the paperwork, the investigation. I met his gaze steadily. Because I wanted to give you the tools to succeed, no matter what happened. I wanted to make sure you had a future that no one could take from you. Max nodded, thoughtfully. It's not just about the money, is it? No, I said. It's about character, about making the right choices, even when they're hard. That's what I wanted to teach you. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing at his lips. I think we're starting to understand. Emily's downfall was slower, more agonizing. The fib's evidence was airtight, and Olivia's recordings painted her as a central figure in the fraud. She tried to cut a deal offering to testify against Daniel in exchange for leniency, but it was too little too late. The prosecutors already had everything they needed. The day Emily was taken into custody, the boys were at school. I sat in the living room watching the news coverage as federal agents led her out of the house in handcuffs. Her face was pale, her expression a mixture of anger and despair. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep sense of finality that evening. I sat the boys down and explained what had happened. Your mother has been arrested, I said, gently. She'll likely be facing a long prison sentence. He thanked jaw heightened, but he nodded. She made her choices. Max's eyes filled with sadness. But he didn't cry. What happens to her now? She'll have to answer for what she has done, I said. But that's not your burden to carry. Focus on your own path, on building a life you can be proud of. They both nodded, their resolve clear. They were ready to move forward. Olivia's next move was nothing short of spectacular. Using the evidence she had gathered, she called an emergency meeting of the hospital's board of directors, armed with financial records, recorded conversations, and legal documents. She dismantled Daniel's remaining influence in under 6 hours. By the time she was finished, his name was irrevocably tarnished, his empire reduced to rubble. She called me afterward, her voice filled with quiet triumph. It's done. He has not nothing left. Thank you, Olivia, I said. For everything. It was just for you, she said. It was for those boys. They deserved better than what Daniel and Emily tried to give them. The boys continued to thrive. They threw themselves into their studies, their passion and determination, growing stronger each day. Ethan, with his sharp analytical mind, began exploring law as a potential career path. Max, ever curious and compassionate, expressed interest in medicine. Watching them find their paths was the greatest reward I could have asked for one evening. As we sat by the fire, Ethan turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Dad, do you regret it? Any of it? I considered his question carefully before answering. I regret trusting the wrong people. I regret the pain it caused all of us, but I don't regret the choices I made to protect you. Those were the right choices. Max nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. He told us that character isn't about being perfect. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. That's exactly right. As the weeks turned into months, the dust began to settle. Emily and Daniel faced their trials, their sentences, ensuring they would be held accountable for their crime. The boys and I focused on the future, building a new foundation for our family. It wasn't easy, but it was honest, and that made all the difference. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. The storm had passed, and we had emerged stronger together. We were ready to face whatever came next. 10 years later, the world was a different place. The events of that fateful Christmas had reshaped all of our lives in ways I couldn't have imagined. As I sat on the balcony of my Barcelona apartment, the Mediterranean breeze carrying the scent of salt and sunlight, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. My sons had grown into extraordinary men. Ethan stood at the podium of a packed Manhattan courthouse, adjusting his tie with the steady confidence of a seasoned prosecutor at 33. He had already built a reputation as one of the Justice Department's leading experts in medical fraud cases. His latest case was a milestone, not just for his career, but for the legacy we had forged together. Your Honor, Ethan began, his voice carrying through the courtroom with the quiet authority that had become his trade jacket. Like to submit new evidence regarding the defendant's continued involvement in criminal enterprises. Across the room, Daniel Williams sat in his prison-issued orange jumpsuit, his once proud demeanor reduced to a hollow shell. He had served 10 years of his 15-year sentence and was seeking parole. Ethan's evidence ensured he wouldn't see the outside of a prison cell anytime soon. As Ethan laid out the details, Daniel's attempts to rebuild his counterfeit medical supply network from behind bars, the human cost of his actions, the patients who had suffered, he never wavered. His arguments were precise, devastating, and delivered with the calm conviction of a man who knew he was fighting for justice. When the hearing concluded, and the parole board announced its decision to deny Daniel's request, Ethan stood tall. He didn't look at Daniel as the guards led him away. Instead, he walked out of the courtroom, with his head held high, ready to tackle the next fight. Across the country, Max was making his own jig on the world. At 33, he was a respected medical ethicist at Johns Hopkins, known for his groundbreaking work in patient advocacy. His efforts had led to the development of the Baker Protocol, a system of rigorous verification standards for medical devices that had become the global gold standard. In his office, Max reviewed the latest reports on the protocol's implementation. Fraudulent medical devices had dropped by 87 worldwide, and hospitals were adopting stricter safety measures. A framed copy of the Baker Protocol hung on the wall behind him alongside another cherished document. The letter he and Ethan had written years ago, about what it meant to be a father. As Max prepared for a meeting with the ethics board, he glanced at the photo on his desk. A picture of him, Ethan and me fishing on a summer afternoon. It was a reminder of where it had all started and why he had chosen this path. Olivia Williams, now Olivia Chen, after remarrying, continued to lead her patient advocacy organization with unrelenting determination. The foundation had grown into an international powerhouse with offices in 12 countries and an endowment large enough to fund groundbreaking research for decades to come. Ethan and Max both served on its board of directors, working to identify and dismantle fraud in the medical industry. Olivia's latest initiative focused on underserved communities, ensuring that hospitals in remote and impoverished areas had access to safe, verified medical devices. Her work was a testament to the power of resilience and the ability to turn pain into progress. As for Emily, her life had become a shadow of what it once was. After serving 6 years in prison, she had struggled to rebuild. Job rejections piled up as her criminal record followed her wherever she went. Her attempts to contact the boy were met with polite but firm refusals, accompanied by copies of their college admission essays, reminders of the values they had chosen to uphold. Emily spent her days in a modest apartment, haunted by the life she had lost. She had gambled everything and lost her choices, leaving her with nothing but regret. I had built a quiet life in Barcelona, consulting for international health care organizations on fraud prevention. My work helped hospitals protect themselves from schemes like Daniel's, ensuring that others wouldn't suffer the same betrayal. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I stayed out of the spotlight. Sophia Martinez kept me updated on Ethan and Max's accomplishments. Sophia, now a special agent in charge of health care. Fraud at the FBI had risen to the top of her field. Her updates always included photos of my sons, their milestones and their growing families. Ethan and Max each had daughters, now both named Joy, in honor of the legacy we had built together. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. I never met my granddaughters in person. Their photos adorned my apartment, reminders of the choices that had shaped their futures, the lessons I had taught their fathers about character integrity, and the power of truth were being passed down to a new generation. The true victory was in Daniel and Emily's downfall. This happened when I was in the first or second year of junior high school. I think I was about 13 years old. I grew up in the countryside. Their destruction had been satisfying in its way. The real triumph was in the lives Ethan and Max had built, the good they had accomplished, and the legacy they carried forward. On Christmas morning, I received a video message from the boys. They stood in the living room of the house I had once called home, the Christmas tree glowing behind them. Their wives and daughters joined them, their smiles bright and full of life. Dave then said, his voice steady, "We wanted you to see this." The camera panned to the wall behind them, where a new plaque had been mounted. Read the Thomas Baker Home Office, a legacy of integrity. Everything we've built, Max said, his voice filled with emotion. We owe to you. I watched the video twice, letting their words sink in. My heart swelled with pride, knowing that the sacrifices it made had been worth it. The greatest revenge was in the destruction of my betrayers. It was in the legacy of my sons, the men they had become, the lives they had touched, and the good they continued to do. Emily and Daniel had underestimated the power of real fatherhood, the strength that came from love, sacrifice, and unwavering principles. In the end, the truth had been both a gift and a burden, but it had set us free. It had given Ethan and Max the tools to build something far greater than I could have imagined. As the sun set over the Mediterranean, I raised a glass to the future. The legacy we had created would endure, a testament to the power of choice and the enduring strength of love, and that I realized was the greatest victory of all years. The next story. Alexa is 32 years old. I married Daniel, my life's greatest love. I lost him, and I'm here to tell you how I cheated on him. Like an irresponsible spouse, I never imagined myself in a location like this. It was an ordinary night or so. I thought a night that would change everything. When I looked around, the familiar took on a strange appearance. Each piece of furniture, a witness to the mayhem that had unfolded. I cheated, and all I could think about were the words that would not leave my head. And I couldn't get over the idea that I had broken my own commitment to myself. The remorse enveloped me like a gloomy garment, stifling, but unstoppable. This decision sent me into a downward spiral of remorse. Now I had to find my own way out. It was never my intention for it to progress this far, but the excitement of an affair clouded my judgment about the life I was wrecking at first. The affair felt thrilling, an escape from the monotony of my life. However, it had done nothing but expand the gap between my spouse and myself. I had abused his confidence, and in that breach, I violated myself. The enormity of my acts weighed heavily on me in ways I never expected, and it was too late to turn back time and reverse the damage I had committed. I ruined our marriage, and he exacted retribution by wrecking my life. Every action has repercussions. As the saying goes, I am currently facing the repercussions of my own judgments and actions. I had a crazy night out. He did not believe my story. When I got home late from this wild night out, she planned to divorce me. It all began simply enough. After a tough week, my girlfriends had dragged me out for a girls' night out. When we eventually met, it felt like the air was charged with energy, ready for an evening of camaraderie and happiness. We mentioned that. We laughed. We danced over the drinks. I lost track of how many drinks I had. The atmosphere got filled with the kind of excitement that only occurs amongst friends on the dance floor. The music beat in my chest, and for a few brief moments, I felt alive and separated from the monotony of my life, free of the obligations that bound me. But let me get into the details. Gentlemen, Daniel and I met 8 years ago at a friend's wedding. I was clearly not at my best in life. New job, just got out of a messy split. Kind of jaded about love and all that. I recall toying with my wine glass and wondering if I should simply leave. When he approached me, he had a crooked smile and an easygoing demeanor that put me at ease right away. Do you suppose they put us here so we could pair up like in a romantic comedy? He gestured at the other single attendees, avoiding eye contact. I had a nice laugh. Not the polite type. If this is a romantic comedy, where is the quirky me? Cute. We hit it off immediately. Daniel was not like the other males I dated. He was quite steady. I was used to men who enjoyed the game or the chase, but backed out when things became serious. Daniel was different. He listened. Actually, listened, and made me feel important. At the time, I was working as a junior jade-cutting specialist at a boutique agency. I was scratching and trying to build a name for myself in an industry filled with 20s. Something all wanted the same thing. It was not glamorous, but I enjoyed it. Daniel, on the other hand, was an engineer. He was working for a firm that specialized in sustainable building, and he had a quiet passion for his profession, and I admired it. He told me about the project he was working on, a green housing construction that would reduce energy waste and expenditures for low-income households. His expression brightened as he talked about it, and I remember thinking, this guy truly wants to make the world a better place. We started dating immediately after the wedding. Daniel lost the flashy sweep you off your feet. Kind of romantic, but he was attentive in meaningful ways. HED tucked tiny notes into my car, wishing me luck before a big presentation, or bring me my favorite takeout when I was too tired to cook after work. 3 years later, we got married. It was a small outdoor ceremony, held at a vineyard for only our closest friends and family. At the time, I worked in senior jade-cutting, and Daniel was the chief engineer at his firm. We acquired a quaint house in the suburbs, talked about having children one day, and started a family. It was perfect. But it was excellent, or so I thought in retrospect. I can see where the fissures started to appear. My job grew very stressful years to late-night networking events, and the pressure to always be on top at the same time. Danielle's job got more demanding with ill hours and deadlines. Both of us were fatigued by the time we arrived home. We stopped chatting. It was only a standard "How was your day?" followed by disconnected nods and half-hearted rage aches. Date nights were few and far between. And when we did go out, it felt like we were just going through motions. I convinced myself that it was typical for every couple to have a low point. I missed the way he used to look at me, as if I were the most important person in the world. And maybe that's why I let myself get involved in something so dangerous, so stupid, that it would cost me everything. But this is the problem with hindsight. It's always too late. Looking back, I asked myself that question every day. Why did I cheat on Daniel? He was a good guy, kind and steadfast. All the things I thought I wanted when we were first married. But to be honest, something shifted for me. Along the way, we've lost the spark. Guys, there weren't any more exciting moments. We stopped going out on gorgeous, romantic dates. We didn't lose our spark at a single instant. It happened throughout our marriage, and neither of us did anything to prevent it from happening. Because we stopped communicating. Our conversation was frigid and brief. So there wasn't just one moment or a big realization. It was a slow unraveling. So subtle that I didn't realize it was happening at first. To be honest, when I finally realized, I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. And instead of attempting to repair our marriage, I went out and had a crazy night later on. Daniel and I became stuck in a rut. Wake up and go to work. Come home, bottom the first, eat dinner, watch TV, sleep and repeat. We still cared about each other. However, it seems like the blaze we had felt had faded to a flicker. Those late-night talks in which we would talk for about our aspirations and plans gone. Instead of clandestine kisses and light-hearted banter, our lives had become a series of checklists with work deadlines, debts to pay, and chores to do. There was nothing romantic about the perfect pair we once were. We set an example for all of our pals, and look at us. Now I felt insignificant, like a cog in Daniel's machine. He had always been quite businesslike and down to earth, and whilst I admired his dedication, I started to feel like an afterthought in his universe. But do you know what the issue was? I did not try to express my feelings to him. I just suffered silently. In the meantime, my job was eating me alive. However, Jake does not sell. It was exhausting, but I wanted confirmation. And when I returned home to a spouse who barely looked up from his laptop, I felt a deep sadness. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be desirable. I wanted to feel like I was still important. Then came the night out with my friends. I expected nothing more than dinner and cocktails. But when I met Jake, things changed. Jake was one of my old college friends. He listened to me in a way I hadn't felt in years. He smiled at my jokes, leaned in when I spoke, and made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the group. To be honest, Jake was not a new person for me. We were pals from college. He had always had a crush on me, but we never went beyond the level of friendship. And here, he was standing in front of me, as handsome as Jake had always been, and he hadn't changed at all. He was tall with black hair and eyes. Oh, sorry. He was even great. I was overjoyed that the coincidence brought him back into my life. And the truth is, that night, I spent more time with Jake than with my buddies. I felt I deserved it. I was finally able to get away from the routine and environment between myself and Daniel. Jake told me he ran his own Jake company and invited me to work for him. Or at the very least, he invited them to a job interview. I am aware of your ability and would like you to come and work with me. I spent the night with him. I assured myself it was not hazardous. It was only for fun. A brief flirtation. Nothing serious. But when he held my hand and asked if I needed another drink, I didn't back away. It wasn't only about Jake. It was about me. About the side of myself that felt disregarded, undervalued, and trapped in a life that had become overly secure and predictable. He made me feel alive. Again, if only for a time. He also brought back memories from the past. He reminded me of how frequently we used to go out and how much we enjoyed laughing with other friends. I wish I could go back in time. I rage ahead, feeling nostalgic, but the situation with Jake went too far. I never wanted to cross that line. I've never wanted to cheat on Daniel. But it occurred. We both drank excessively. Perhaps it was just about drinking. We had missed each other. And now that I had discovered each other again, we wanted to cross the border that we had never crossed before. But that moment cost me my life. Marriage and everything I owned. I didn't cease my affair with Jake. It was as if it were a substance or an addiction. One could not shed it. Made me feel something I hadn't experienced in years. We continued to meet in secret over long lunch breaks. Despite the fact that I had notified Daniel that I would be late for work. We were both cautious, but not sufficient. So I suppose he noticed something in me that I did not perceive in myself. It was difficult to tell though, because he behaved very differently. Extra polite and somewhat distant. He also began asking questions. Not directly, but in ways that made me laugh. How was the event? Did you see somebody who piqued your interest? Are you certain? You don't need me to bring you home from work. I do not mind. His demeanor and words were more cheery or casual, and I could feel him moving away. Waiting one evening, around 3 months into our relationship, Daniel surprised me with a romantic dinner. At home, he lighted candles, prepared my favorite meal, then opened a bottle of wine we had saved for ourselves. He murmured, smiling sweetly, as he poured me one. I received the impression that we'd both been really busy lately. I simply want to reconnect. Guilt flooded over me. As I looked into his eyes, he was attempting, and I was sneaking behind his back. I swore I wouldn't stay with Jake, but he couldn't be dismissed that quickly. When I mentioned that we needed to halt, he invited me back. His charm and promises. I felt like I was the center of his universe. So the affair persisted, even as I clung to the tenuous hope that Daniel was unaware. I had no idea. Daniel had been monitoring me the entire time, gathering evidence silently. He had seen the messages that tracked the late-night meetings and pieced together all of the lies I'd spoken. But instead of addressing me, he simply let me explore further, waiting patiently for his revenge. And then one day, everything started to unravel. It had started with small things. An email that did not arrive. A meeting at work was cancelled. A client abruptly decided not to renew his contract. At first, I didn't think much about it. But then everything started going wrong. Projects on which I had worked so hard were strangely assigned to others. However, whispers about my unprofessional actions quickly circulated. Daniel was a stoic, and as always at home, he became more so. He would kiss my forehead, encourage me to care for myself, and then watch me spiral, secretly, loving the chaos he had produced. I had no idea at the time, but he was pulling strings behind the scenes using evidence of my affair to deconstruct the life I had built for myself. I arrived late to the party and had no idea what was going on. My manager summoned me into her office one day to discuss concerns about my behavior. Outside of work, I had no idea what she was talking about until she shoved her phone across the desk. There was a snapshot on the computer of me and Jake with our arms around each other, laughing, too close to being mistaken for friends. I could feel the blood leaving my face. This was delivered to me anonymously, she explained, her face expressionless, but her tone severe. You need to grasp what this looks like. All right. I stumbled through an explanation, but she didn't appear to believe it. We have professionalism here. Don't give me any more excuses to question yours, she murmured, waving me away. My knees felt wobbly as I went out of her office. Daniel. It had to be him at home. Daniel pretended that everything was the same. When I returned home, he still smiled at me, kissed my cheek and asked about my day. However, there was frost in his gaze that had not been there before. I attempted to disregard my uneasiness by telling myself I was imagining things, but it was long before the financial issues began. One night, I attempted to pay a bill online and discovered that one of our joint accounts had been emptied. I worried and called Daniel, who told me that he had only shifted some money around for a private investment. That money was for our savings. I argued, "It's still our money." He replied with a terrifying smile, "Do not worry about it." In the weeks that followed, I discovered other alterations. Suddenly, credit cards that I had previously used freely would no longer be accepted. Subscriptions were cancelled. Unexpectedly, even my gym membership was cancelled without notice. The walls felt as if they were closing in. However, Daniel was completely unaware of the situation. The true gut punch came when he finally confronted me, but not in the way I expected. One evening, as I returned home from another clandestine rendezvous with Jake, I noticed Daniel waiting for me in the living room. He had a chilly expression in his eyes. He seemed to know everything, and he was aware that his laptop was open and on the screen was a folder called "The Truth." I became anxious and started shaking. I thought, "I'd keep it hidden forever, but no secret can last forever." There was no way out while I was thinking about it. I had to deal with the ramifications of what I had done. "Sit down," he murmured, his voice oddly calm. My heart pounded as I obeyed. He opened the folder and my stomach fell inside. Were images, copies of chats between me and Jake, emails I had sent him, and even timestamps from our meeting. I knew everything, Daniel said, including his voice, which worried me. I had known for months. The ground trembled beneath my feet. I felt like I was going to faint, but I didn't. In that moment, I wished I could genuinely block out what I was going to hear and witness. I had no way out. I was going to say something when he lifted his hand to silence me. I wanted to vanish. I tried to conceal, but I couldn't. My world was coming apart, and there was nothing I could do about it. "Then," he continued, "I pondered confronting you right then and there," he said. "But then I understood that you deserved more than simply a respite. You deserved to feel the consequences of every lie you told me. Every second you treated me like an idiot." So Hed known for a long time, but he had a well-thought-out retribution plan, because he wanted me to feel the same way he did. His retaliation was meticulously planned. My throat was dry. I simply stared at him. "Daniel, I apologize." "Say it," he snapped momentarily, losing his composure. "Are you not sorry for eating on me?" You're sorry. You were caught. Not sure whether he was correct or wrong. Perhaps he was, because I was not terminating my affair with Jake when already gone too far. He relaxed and focused his stare on me. "So here's how this will operate. We're finished. I've already filed for divorce." The subsequent weeks felt like a nightmare. Daniel took pleasure in Karazi. My life, my affair became widely known. Her friends, my family and my co-workers, people who used to respect me, turned on me with disgust. My parents, who had always liked Daniel, stood firm with him in the office. The rumors spread like wildfire. The photo of Jake and me, which had been displayed on my boss's desk, began to circulate throughout the office. My reputation was in shreds, and I was forced to quit before being fired. And Jake, the man had risked everything for, he vanished. The moment the fallout began, his communications became more distant. His excuses became more numerous, and he eventually ghosted me completely. I learned it too late that he didn't care about me. I was only a distraction for him. Something fleeting. Something that did not matter. By the time the divorce was official, I had nothing. He took the house, the funds, and the car. The prenuptial agreement, which I had signed without hesitation years before, hardly gave me enough to get started again. However, the worst thing was not what he took from me. He left behind a void. I realized that I had damaged my own life bit by bit for something that didn't matter. Now I live alone in a small apartment, gazing out at the solitude that stretches about me. Every day, I review the decisions that led me here. It's possible that I was so uninformed. Daniel's vengeance was less about taking things from me and more about making me realize how much I had lost. And he succeeded in living my chaotic life, hoping that one day he'll forgive my self-much. Love, Alexa. Update. Hello, folks. I'm back. Because I believe you all deserve to hear an update on my tale. Life hasn't changed much, as you may be aware. Daniel and I shared many friends, and I occasionally ran into him. On occasions, we both received invitations. This news does have some positive aspects. I am still invited to some gatherings. Not everyone has separated themselves. For me, to be honest, the most important people had already done it. I mean, they are separating themselves from me. But at least some individuals remained, and my social life was utterly ruined. The point is that every time I met Daniel, I tried to approach him and talk to him, in the hopes of developing a connection with him and building something together. Yes, I heard him frequently, and he also devastated my life. But he was the true love of mine. I know, you'll argue that if he was my love, I wouldn't have cheated on him. But sometimes things happen, and we get lost. I couldn't stop thinking about him, and I couldn't shake the feeling of guilt inside of me. The first time I saw him after the divorce was at a birthday dinner for one of our friends, Rachel. I almost did not go. I was sure if I could see him, let alone in public, I wanted to show myself, and the rest of the world, that I was not completely defeated. Finally, I decided to go, and my heart plummeted as I entered. Daniel was already laughing with a group of pals, looking more relaxed than I had seen him in years. He appeared happy. He appeared free. We made eye contact for a brief while, and I smiled at him. Little and shy, he did not reciprocate the smile. Instead, he just continued his talk, chuckling, as if I didn't exist. That is who I was for him. Nothing. The rest of the evening was torment. Every time I tried to be in a group, the tension fluctuated, conversations became awkward. People averted their sight, and the laughter that had come so naturally before turned tight. Daniel, in contrast, appeared to thrive. He was smart, engaging, and laughed louder than everyone else, while I sat quietly in the corner, nursing a glass of wine and wishing I could simply disappear. I attempted to strike up a discussion with him. I apologized for what I did. He didn't say anything. He simply moved away from me. He gave me no consideration. A few months later, I attended a barbecue hosted by another mutual acquaintance, and decided to try to chat to him. I told him keep ignoring the weight of what I'd done, and I hoped, stupidly, that I could find some way to apologize, to explain. Him, not sure. Make amends. I found him alone by the grill, flipping patties and casually conversing with someone nearby. Gathering all of my bravery, I came up to him. Daniel, I spoke quietly, the words trembling in my throat. Can we talk for a minute? He looked at me, his expression unclear. I was wondering if he would agree to that. Then he shook his head. I do not think we have anything to talk about, he proceeded. Cool, but polite. Not anymore. Please, I pleaded, my voice breaking. He'd just like to apologize. I understand that there's nothing I can do to undo what I did, but I want you to know that I am deeply sorry. He glanced at me for a few moments, and I thought I caught a glimpse of something, perhaps angry or sad. But as soon as I noticed, it was gone. Finally, he added, I don't need your apology. I needed your honesty and loyalty. When it counted, and you couldn't offer me that. His comments hit me like a slap, and I opened my lips to respond, but he didn't look at me anymore, just returned to the grill. Like, if I didn't exist after that. I stopped trying. Every time I needed to see him. At an event, I stayed on the outskirts watching as he laughed and chatted freely. His life appeared undisturbed by the agony he had caused in mine, and I had learned through common friends that he had started dating again. Nothing serious, but enough to make me feel a strong twinge of jealousy. It seemed like he was going on and starting a new life without me. And now I was stranded in the debris of the one I had damaged. Those exchanges served as a daily reminder of what I had lost, of the love I had abandoned for something so fleeting and worthless. And it didn't matter how much I rebuilt shadows of my betrayal. With every step, I was haunted by a phantom from which I could never escape that. I had no chance to chat to him, let alone have anything more for. So certainly Jake's retaliation destroyed me. He devastated my work, finances, and social life. Danielle's vengeance extended into my social life. Most of our friends, most of whom had previously been mine first, supported him. They believed his story. Why shouldn't they? He held the receipts. Proof of my betrayal. Each occasion I had to attend felt like coming into a courtroom and being silently charged. People would step back. Their discussion became quieter as I approached. Some simply cut me off, removing me from their lives without saying anything. My family didn't even hug me. My parents, who loved Daniel, were distraught by what I had done. My mother didn't call as much, and when she did, her tone was sharp and judgmental. "You made your bed," she told me once. "Now you must lie in it." His revenge was still hurting my life, and it would be for a long time. I was also feeling really lonely. Jake vanished after he discovered what was going on with my husband. He didn't want to be a part of this grand revenge. His vengeance had an effect on my health as well. It was extremely stressful, and my health suffered. I began to lose weight, not because I tried, but because I was unable to eat. I began losing weight, not because I was trying, but because I was unable to eat. My hair began to thicken and dark circles formed permanently beneath my eyes. Nights were the worst. I used to lie awake for hours, reliving every moment of my affair, every lie I'd spoken, and every decision that had led me to this point. Anxiety settled in my chest, and melancholy soon followed. Therapy was out of my reach, so I faced my pain alone, sinking deeper into despondency. Oh, I have to tell you about something else he did. When I tried to speak with him, he sent me a picture of the two of us from our wedding, along with a reminder of what you threw away. Also, when he realized that some people were still asking me to their parties, he began telling them that I was fighting to get my life together, and wasn't good company for anyone. Then, there were reminders of the life he was leading. Without me, he started seeing another woman, who was everything. I was not sweet, dedicated, or respected. Then, I saw people upload photos of themselves smiling and happy, while I sat alone in my dark apartment, going through images of the life I could have had, but didn't ruin. This was my narrative. Gentlemen, Danielle's retaliation was neither loud nor dramatic. It was gradual, systematic, and devastating. He didn't just punish me for my betrayal. He made sure I felt its consequences in every fiber of my existence. And now, living in the aftermath of my decisions, plagued by the life I destroyed, every day reminds me of what I had and what I've lost. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.